Good morning, everybody. This is Sally Talk Live. I had a little bit of a technical difficulties this morning, and I almost didn't think that I was going to be able to do this. I was having trouble uploading my little studio thing here, but then just before, literally at 9:59, it popped up, and I went, "Whoa, there we go!" So I was just organizing everything and making sure that it's all coming in. So anyway, you got me today. We have a little break in the guests. I hope you've been enjoying my guests. I know I have. It's just super fun to have people on and have conversations. And I think everybody has a really interesting story, and I think it's fun to listen to other people's stories. So today I thought it would be fun to talk about celebrity sightings. I was out last night with some friends, and we started into that whole thing. And I don't know, I mean, if you have this, but it seems like it's a universal thing that one person tells a story about, oh yeah, I saw this famous person. And then the next thing you know, 15 minutes later, you've had at least 10 or 15 stories of, oh, and I saw this famous person and that famous person. It is great. It's so fun to share that type of stuff because, you know, I'm not a big celebrity person, and I'm going to admit right now, do not watch the Kardashians, and I know who they are, but that's about it. And I question Kylie Jenner's cosmetic line. There've been some questions about what's really in it, but I'm throwing that out there. But anyway, I haven't been a big, but there are certain celebrities that I really, really like, or I still do think it's kind of cool that when you run into one, because it's like fine. It's like looking in the African safari, and you see like a spotted jaguar or something. Like you go, oh my gosh, I don't think jaguars are in the African safari, but anyway, a spotted lion on African safari, and everybody's ooh, So there is something to be said about famous people, and they become famous for a reason, and everybody has their stories. And I've shared on this before about how my great-grandfather shook hands with Abraham Lincoln in Springfield, Illinois, when he first came, or actually great-great-grandfather came from Germany. So we all have kind of like those kind of stories. And they're funny when somebody sees a famous person and then passes it down. And then you wonder how true they are too, or if they've been embellished or whatever. It's kind of interesting too, if you think about it. Celebrities used to be a big thing for autographs. I don't know if autographs are so big anymore, right? Because everyone does selfies. So you take a selfie with, and that's real proof, man. Autographs, I never was a big fan of autographs. And one of my favorite actors when I was young was Paul Newman, and Paul Newman was famous for not giving autographs. And if you saw him out, he wouldn't give any autographs or anything. And so if you had something with his autograph, it was actually really valuable. But I always felt like, how can you, prove that that's their signature? I guess you could, but if you got them to sign a cocktail napkin or something, but anyway, so I just thought I'd tell some of my celebrity sightings. They're pretty, I'm sure everybody has theirs, but I've had some kind of interesting ones. My dad had a couple fun ones too. My dad took a cross-country trip with his uncle and aunt. No, I don't think it was my aunt, because he wasn't married yet, because he didn't. My great uncle Adolf didn't get married until he was 50, so he lived at home with his mother until then. But anyway, they went on a big cross-country trip and went to California from Memphis, Tennessee. And my father got to meet Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland when he was 10 on the set of Charge of the Light Brigade. And that's one of my favorite stories, that I just still can't believe that my father met Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland. That's huge for me. And I found that out after I became a big fan of Robin Hood and Olivia de Havilland and, all of that. I found that out later. So that was kind of cool. It wasn't like that even made me like them. So another story of my father's, my father is very, he's very funny, and he was in World War II. And he was stationed outside of Carmel in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, and he spent some time there because he was on the young side. So he didn't turn 18 until 1943, and we were already in the war for a couple of years. So he was kind of late getting into the war, and they were kind of moving him around. So he was up near San Francisco area, and he loved it up there. It was so beautiful. But anyway, he was at a bar, supposedly. I'm not surprised that my dad was at a bar, but my dad was in a bar. And at the end of the bar was Joseph Cotten. Now, any old movie fans know Joseph Cotten. Joseph Cotten was in Citizen Kane, so a lot of times people know him from that. But he was a very famous actor and friend of Orson Welles. But anyway, Joseph Cotten looks just like my dad. He really does. He has the bushy kind of eyebrows. He has the same kind of face and the same kind of hair. He looks just like my dad. So he was sitting at the end of the bar, and supposedly my dad said, Joseph Cotten looked up at my dad and said, "Hey, you look a lot like me." And my dad said, "Yep, that's what people tell me." And he said, "Well, then let me buy you a drink." So my dad says, now this is where it gets where I wonder if it's true. My dad said that he had 2 girls with him, Joseph Cotten, and he said, bought my dad a drink, and then he said, why don't you come and join us and take one of these girls off my hands? So I still wonder if that happened, but I'm not surprised if Joseph Cotten said to my dad, "Hey, you look like me." So I thought that was funny. And then, of course, back then they used to always buy servicemen drinks and stuff. So anyway, I love that story. So some of my encounters, I talked to Paul Newman before. This one was a fun one. I love Paul Newman so much, and I missed meeting him like 3 times in my life. Never met him and never saw him in person. But when I was in college, a group of us went into New York, and on a bus, it was like a trip. And we went in to see My Fair Lady when Rex Harrison was doing the revisit, which was amazing. And still, it's one of my favorite musicals. And it was an amazing night. And just to see Rex Harrison do My Fair Lady was just such a treat. And he played it so differently as an older man. It was just perfect. He was perfect. Anyway, so we were leaving. We were going over to the bus, and all my friends, we were all going over to the bus, and we were waiting to go on, and everyone was pointing at someone across the street. And I said, "Oh, who are you pointing at?" And they said, "We think that woman over there is Joanne Woodward, who is Paul Newman's wife." And at the time, they were very famous. They were in all the magazines and everything. Anybody my age would know that. And so I looked over and I saw her there, and I said, "Well, when somebody go over and say hi to her? She's sitting down there all by herself." And nobody was like, "Oh, we can't go over there." So I was like, "Oh, I'll show everyone." So I walked over, and I walked over to her, and she was very tiny. She was not, I'm not that tall. I'm 5'5", and I may have been wearing heels, but she was shorter than I was. But I went over to her, and she's so beautiful. And she looked up at me, and oh my gosh, she had the most beautiful blue eyes. Everyone always talked about Paul Newman's eyes. She had the most beautiful blue eyes. And I said, "Hello, my name is Sally. There's a big group of girls over there pointing at you and talking. And we just wanted to let you know that we're a big fan of yours." And I was like 19, I think. And I was just very sophisticated, big fan of your articles in women's magazines and all the things that you do. And I was very good about not bringing up her husband, even though in my head I'm going, "She's Paul Newman's wife." So and so I said, "We just wanted to say hi." And I said, and then I was so sophisticated. I said, "I wish I was here to see Candide. I hear you're wonderful in that." And she said, "Well, what?" And she was chatty. She was like, "Well, where are you from?" And she goes, "Well, where'd you go see?" And I said, "Oh, we saw My Fair Lady." And she said, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait to see it. I've heard it's amazing." And I said, "Yeah, it really is. It's one of my favorites." And I said, "But I hope I can get back and see Candide." I'm having this lovely little chat with her. So then I decided, because this is me, "Oh, you've spent too long talking to her, Sally. You need to go and show her how sophisticated you are and go back to your friends. So I said, I don't want to bother you anymore. I just want to say, we're just big fans. And she's like, I'm so glad you came over and talked to me. She goes, I'm just waiting for my ride. And so this was great. I'm so glad you said hi. And I said, great. Okay. And I just walked away. So I get back, and by then everybody's getting on the bus. And then all of a sudden everyone starts screaming, and they're up against the windows of the bus. And I'm like, what's everybody? And I'm thinking, why isn't everybody coming over and telling me how great I am? Why are you all screaming at the windows? And then it hit me. Oh no. And just by the time I got to the window, Paul Newman had pulled up in his Datsun sports car, his Datsun 300ZX, jumped out. I didn't see this because I couldn't get to the window, but this is what they told me. He jumped out, ran over, kissed her on the cheek, opened the door for her, and off they zoomed. So I would, if I had just waited, I would have been able to have met Paul Newman. I still am mad about that. So that's one sighting. I did post about how when I was doing the promo for this, how I stood on the corner. Worked in Manhattan, and I worked in 30 Rockefeller Center. And when you work in 30 Rockefeller Center, you see tons of celebrities. And what was funny about that was that they have, we had NBC was there, and the David Letterman show was there, and the Today Show, and Saturday Night Live, and blah, blah. And so all of that stuff was going on at 30 Rock when I was working there, which was exciting. And so you always knew what celebrity. It was funny. You didn't even have to check to see what celebrity was on the Today Show or anything, because they you saw the fans, and the fans always would be standing around the elevator bays with 8x10 glossies of that person. And I always wondered, like, back then, where they got the 8x10 glossies, but somewhere they got them, and then they would all stand around. And so you knew if it was Michael J. Fox or, whoever was being interviewed, you always knew. And so most of the time I was just very too sophisticated and too, I worked at 30 Rock. I didn't need to stand around and wait for somebody and get an autograph, But every once in a while there was some really, really cool people. And one time I was coming in from lunch, and Dudley Moore from Arthur and all that. And at that time he was big, and I loved Arthur so much. And I had friends of mine who used to ride into the train in New York, and we knew all the lines from Arthur by heart. My roommate, Betsy, and I knew all the lines. We still use them. I knew Arthur by heart. And so he comes walking in, and he's with someone, and they're sneaking into the NBC elevator bay that had a security guard. And he was just about to get past the security guard, and this woman runs up to him and goes, Mr. Moore, I need your autograph. And so he stopped, and she starts digging in her purse, and he's waiting. She's digging in her purse. And so I was like, I was right there, and I was like, oh, you got to say something to Dudley Moore. So I stepped up, and I was like, hi, Mr. Moore. I was like, I don't need your autograph. I said, but I just have to tell you, Arthur, I'm such a fan of yours, and Arthur is really one of my favorite movies. It's awesome, and I just need to tell you that. And he looked up to me, and he goes, thank you so much. I'm so glad, you liked it. And I said, yeah, my friends and I, we do all the lines on the train, and it's just, really, really just a big fan of all your work. And he goes, thank you so much. And then the woman goes, I found my pen. And then I went, have a nice day. And he rolled his eyes, and he goes, thanks. And then the woman wanted her autograph, and I left. So that was that. I've had like, crazy stuff when you're walking around New York City. And I used to, of course, everyone walks. I walked a lot. And you would have all sorts of crazy encounters where you would just be standing there. So one of the times I was walking around heading somewhere, and I was standing on a street corner, and I looked up, and it was Tom Brokaw. Like, Tom Brokaw was just standing next to me waiting for the light to change. It was just funny. And you would have like, you would see somebody, or you'd see somebody across the street, or, this and that. And so one day I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and I was standing on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street, and I looked up, and there was Andy Warhol, and he was much taller than me, was standing right next to me, it was like something out of Central Casting. Like he had the little wig thing he used to wear, the leather jacket with the scarf, and under his arm was Interview magazine, and he was just standing there. So the picture that I picked for the promo was so reminded me of him, because he looked at me. He stood there and he looked over at me as I was looking up at him, going, "Oh, I think that's that. Wow, that's Andy Warhol." Not I think it was Andy Warhol. He turned and he looked at me, and there was this look in his eye like, "Oh, don't recognize me. Just don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything." And so I was like, "Oh, don't worry, I won't say anything." So I didn't say anything, but I just thought it was just funny. It was just funny. But that was what would happen in New York, was that you would just, I don't know, you would just see somebody. I remember John Stamos was in General Hospital, and he was Blackie Parrish, and I was walking to work. I'd walk from Penn Station up to where I worked at 30 Rock, and I cut across one of the side streets. I'd pick different side streets, and I cut across, and all of a sudden this really cute young guy was walking along with the black hair and the leather jacket, and he's walking along, and I was like looking at him, and he's like looking at me, and he's smiling, and he's like nodding at me, and I'm looking at him going, "Oh my God, that's Blackie Parrish." It's really funny. So you'd have a lot of those kind of like, those kind of encounters and stuff. So last night I was telling my James Marsden story, which is a great story. So my son had been Into the Woods. Well, actually, I'll tell it the other way. So I was at Laurel Tavern in Studio City, which is now like a big hip, happening place. And at the time, it had just started becoming like a big hip happening place for celebrities. And I was there with a friend of mine, and she wanted to, we had said, "Oh, it's Friday night, let's go out." And so we went out, we were out, and it was a big deal. We got a seat. So I was excited that we got a seat at the Laurel Tavern, because then I thought, oh, well, we can stargaze so we could see who's there. And around in Studio City along that area, there's Firefly, and supposedly Clooney goes there all the time. There's this sushi place that George Clooney goes all the time. I've never seen George Clooney, but I'm not a fan. So he's okay. He's okay. I'm just not, he's no Cary Grant, just throwing that out there. But anyway, so I was at Laurel Tavern, and my friend, it's like 10:30, and my friend goes, "Oh, let's go. I'm tired. I want to go." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? We got to stay a little bit longer." No, I want to go. I want to go. And so she got up to leave. And I was sitting there, and I was like, "Ugh, I can't believe she wants to leave. I want to stay just a little longer." And this beautiful face, goes right in front of me and goes, "Can I have this chair?" And I went, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Are you who I think you are?" And he looks at me and goes, "I don't know. Who do you think I am?" So cute. I'll never forget that. "I don't know. Who do you think I am?" And I said, "You're James Marsden." And he said, "I am." So this was just after like 27 Dresses, and he wasn't way before like Westworld. And I think he's more of a household name now, but it was more like he was just an X-Men and 27 Dresses and Hairspray, and Enchanted. So I said to him, I said, "You can have the chair, but I have to tell you a story." So I said, so my son was Into the Woods in 8th grade. And when they gave him the costume, they gave him purple tights, and he freaked out. He was like, "I can't believe I'm going to have to wear purple tights. I'm so embarrassed. I don't know how to play this part." And I said, "Look, this is what you got to do. You got to play this guy." He was Rapunzel's prince in Into the Woods. "You got to play him like this guy in Enchanted." So we pull up YouTube, and I show him scenes with James Marsden in Enchanted. And if you haven't seen Enchanted, it's a animation to real life movie. It's very clever, where the characters from Cinderella, I remember, go from, she's a princess, and she goes, and she all of a sudden is in real life New York. And you got James Marsden and Patrick Dempsey. So if you haven't seen this movie, I mean, just for those two reasons alone. But she goes, and so James Marsden is the prince she's supposed to marry in the cartoon. And he comes to real life and is going around New York in his full prince regalia looking for her. And so it's hilarious. And he's so funny because he's so arrogant, and he's the prince. His dad owns the kingdom. So I said, so anyway, it was a lot shorter, I was saying to James Marsden, because he knew his character and Janet. So I told my son was nervous about playing Rapunzel's prince. And I told my son, you got to play it like this guy. And we pulled up YouTube videos, and I showed him you and Enchanted, and he went, got it. And I said, he did great. Because he just kind of channeled you. And he goes, I'm so glad you told me that story. That's a great story. And he was so cute. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to let you get back to your friends. I said, but my friends and I love 27 Dresses. It's a great movie for us chicks. And I said, and I'm really looking forward to your career. And he just gave me that big James Marsden smile. And he said, thanks. He goes, yeah, me too. And he was very cute and took his chair. So what's funny is that about 2 months later, I kind of was at the Toluca Lake Trader Joe's, and I saw him there, and I bumped his cart, and I was just devastated that he didn't remember who I was. Just can't believe it. Really, really devastated, but I guess I'll forgive him. He's so cute. I'll forgive him. So, my last story, I'm not going to go on because we could go on and on with these, but I would love it if everybody goes on my Facebook page and tells me some sightings, or on my Instagram and tells me some of their celebrity sightings. I love hearing celebrity sightings. I think they're really funny. Besides the, I've had some crazy ones here. It's just, I tell one really funny one that one of my friends told me happened to her. So this one's not mine, but this one's a really good one. So in the Hollywood Bowl, if you're not from LA, the Hollywood Bowl is an iconic, venue. And when the show's over, literally the mass of people all head out the same direction. So it's just like the sea. It really is a sea of people like coming in and like merging in and then merging in and then going down the hill and then merging. So this friend of mine I worked with, she was an older woman. She told me that when she first moved to California, she was coming out of the Hollywood Bowl and they were merging and all of a sudden she was just next to this man. She was with her friends, but she was next to this man, and she just said all I could say was that he just smelled wonderful. He just smelled so good. She goes, I was overwhelmed with how good this man smelled. So I just turned to see, where is this coming from? And she goes, and it was Cary Grant. She was literally arm to arm next to Cary Grant as they were leaving the Hollywood Bowl. So she put her arm in the crook of his arm, and she said, I know who you are. And he said, you do? And she said, yes, and I won't tell anybody. And he said, yes, let's keep it as a secret between the two of us. And she said, I promise. And then they parted. And then that was it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a good one. And, here in California, we all have a million of them because it's just funny. When I first moved here, I took a tour. They have a million tours, but there's one really hilarious one, and I guess it's still going. It's called Grave Line Tours, and you go around in a hearse, and they go to all the places in Hollywood where people died. So it sounds really gruesome, but it's actually really hilarious. But there's some pretty well, that's the Hollywood, because you've heard about it when you were a kid, not living here, and this is where this person died, this is where this person died. And so it's gruesome and it's dark and it's all that, but it was pretty entertaining. And we passed by, going down the street, Jimmy Stewart lived, and the guy said, this is where Jimmy Stewart lives. Sometimes he comes out and says hi, he's walking his dog. And he goes, oh, maybe that's him at the end of the corner. And I literally lost it. I was like, whoa, Jimmy Stewart, I'll lose it. And it turned out he wasn't him, so I didn't meet him. But my ex-husband, Steve, who was a lighting designer, did a big event, and they had to put up they weren't sure if it was going to rain. And it was a big, huge party. He used to do these big, huge parties for Marvin Davis in Beverly Hills. And so they put up this huge tent because they were afraid that it might rain. So his wife wanted it to have the stars And so Steve did this elaborate, intricate white light thing underneath the tent so that when people were dancing and everything, they turned the lights off. It still seemed like the stars in the sky. And so what happened was that Steve was walking around making sure everything was okay. And Jimmy Stewart walked up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, young man, I understand you're responsible for the stars in the sky." And Steve said, he goes, there were celebrity encounters that he had, but that one was really, he just nodded. And Jimmy Stewart said, "Good job, young man, good job," and patted him on the shoulder and walked away. That was a good one. So my last one is kind of twofold. So I was in New York, and a friend of mine had a really big crush on Michael J. Fox. And it was funny because Michael J. Fox did a couple movies, and they didn't really, it's not as common. It probably is so much more common now. But back when I worked in New York in the 80s, they didn't do you didn't see a lot of filming as much as I'm sure you do now. And so when they did do filming, it was exciting. So there was a building that was going up right across from where I worked. And they used that for A Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox. But then he did the movie Bright Lights, Big City. And so this friend of mine was like, "Oh my gosh, he's back in town and I have to meet him. I have such a huge crush on him." So, and it was funny, she was married. She said, "Well, my husband had said to me that if Michael J. Fox wanted to marry me, he would let me go." So she goes, "I got to take my shot." So anyway, we were all standing and watching the filming and how that works and everything. And he had his little trailer. And so there was one point where he went back into his trailer and nobody saw him. And I saw him. I said, "How come guys, I think he just went back into his trailer." And so he went up in the trailer and he didn't close the door. And I was kind of like trying to peek in, and he peeked out at me and waved at me. It was so funny. He was just adorable. So he came out and he waved at us and smiled at us and everything, and he was great. Well, while we were standing there watching Michael J. Fox, we were just all like watching him film, and they had a big fan, and he was running into the fan, and it was about like 20 of us, and we were all standing there, and we all kind of got chatty, and we were talking to each other, and we were filming this scene. And all of a sudden, this man comes up and he's standing with us, and we're watching, and then they go cut, and then we could talk again. And we were done watching, and we were all kind of chatting. And this man goes, "What are we all watching?" And this guy who was standing with us turns around and goes, "Holy shit, you're Walter Cronkite." And it was Walter Cronkite. So young people might not know, but Walter Cronkite. It was Walter Cronkite. He was literally standing right next to me. And he was the funniest. It was so funny. And so we said, "Oh, we're watching Michael J. Fox." And he's a great young man, isn't he? And we're like, "Walter Cronkite, what are you doing here?" And he goes, "I'm just walking, go ahead and do a meeting or something." I don't know. I don't even remember. We thought that was the funniest thing, that here we were all standing there watching Michael J. Fox. And he goes, one of the most famous newsmen ever was standing there and just came up to us and was like, "What are we watching?" It was just hilarious. So anyway, those are some of my sightings. I know there's more, but it could get, could go on and on. But I just thought I'd share some of those. I thought it would be fun. I think it's funny. I don't like to bug them. I like to just see them now. And then if, get a picture with them, that would be fun. But I'm not even good at that. I mean, I went to a Q&A. My dear friend, one of my good friends, she invited me to a Q&A with Ewan McGregor, and she got mad at me because I couldn't go down and get a picture of him because it was just, he was surrounded by actors and I felt weird. So I can be shy about stuff like that. I did get a couple of pictures of him, but just not with him and me. I don't know. I want a picture of a celebrity I really like. I want them to be able to look at it themselves and say, "Oh, there's Sally." So I don't know, charity event or something. That's what I'd rather have it be. But anyway, that's just me. So Anyway, thanks for listening. And I will have a guest next week. I'll do the promos. I'm just finalizing everything, so I don't want to say just yet who's going to be. And if you would like to, please follow me. If you'd like to, please comment on my comment section. If you have a celebrity sighting you'd like to share, everybody always loves those. Like my Facebook page, my Instagram, all of those things, because that helps me. But following me on this podcast is helping me, because in the next couple of weeks, I'm really going to start kicking into the advertising, the promoting, and the monetizing it. So we're going to, move it forward. I think I've got all the actually doing it down in enough content. And also, I want to thank my sponsor. I am an independent consultant with Arbonne International, and for 39 years ago, Peter Mork, our founder, whose birthday, God bless him, he passed away. He would have been 80, was just the other day, and he really wanted a skincare and personal care products that were healthy, that didn't have harmful ingredients, didn't test on animals, didn't harm the environment. So everything was all recyclable packaging. We don't use any animal byproducts. We've never done any testing. We don't deal with companies or anybody who tests on animals. We've always had the PETA bunny. So PETA's always liked us. And we don't use any byproducts of the petroleum industry. We don't use any harmful chemicals. There are 2,000 ingredients that we don't allow in our products. That's 800 more ingredients that the EU doesn't allow. So we're very stringent. We don't even like dyes and chemical fragrances. So give us a shot. If you have any questions about Arbonne, let me know. My website is sallyholida at .arbonne.com. That's sallyholida.arbonne.com. And you can find me through all of my connections through Facebook and everything else. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you guys have a great week. And I will talk to you later.